Nassau, the Bahamas, July 8, 1943. 3 in the morning. Rain hammers the windows of Government House. A tropical storm, the kind that rattles shutters and floods streets and makes you remember how small your island really is. Inside, the Duke of Windsor sleeps in a room he had painted the exact shade of his wife's favorite face powder. The renovation cost $21,000. The budget was $6,000. He paid the difference himself. Across the island, at a mansion called Westbourne, Sir Harry Oakes was found dead in his bedroom. The circumstances were violent, disturbing, the kind of death that suggested either rage or ritual. Feathers from the mattress drifted in the air from the bedroom fan, still turning. Harry Oakes was one of the wealthiest men in the British Empire. Gold mining fortune, British baronet, the Duke's close friend, his golf partner, the man who made Nassau his home and brought his millions with him. In a few hours, Harold Christie will discover the body. Christie, the real estate developer, the house guest who stayed the night to avoid driving in the storm. He will call the Duke. The Duke will take charge. He will bypass the local police. He will not call Scotland Yard. He will telephone 2 detectives in Miami, men he knows, men who once served as his bodyguard. Within 48 hours, they will arrest the wrong man. The investigation will collapse. The murder will remain unsolved. But right now, at 3 in the morning, the Duke sleeps, the rain falls, the fan turns, and somewhere in the machinery of what happens next, something fundamental breaks. This is a story about houses, 3 of them, and the price of living in cages you mistake for palaces. Can you govern people you've never learned to see? Paris, Bois de Boulogne, March 2023. Workers arrive at Villa Windsor carrying measuring tapes and clipboards and cameras. The gates swing open for the first time in 5 years. The house has been empty since 2018, when Mohammed Al-Fayed returned the lease to the city of Paris. 18 years early, the 50-year term barely started. Fondation Mansart won the restoration contract, a heritage preservation organization. Their mandate transformed this private residence into a public museum. Focus on 20th century decorative arts. Open the doors. Let people see. The workers enter. Dust sheets cover furniture. Windows sealed. Air stale. Sunlight breaks through when they unlock the shutters. 14 rooms. 12,700 square feet. 2.7 acres of ground surrounded by wrought iron fencing. Built 1928 to 1929 by architect Roger Bouvard for Henri Lillas. Cut limestone construction. Reception room ceilings 15 feet high. One of the workers makes a note: structural repairs needed to the facade. Another photographs the Louis XV and XVI elements mixed with Art Deco. Someone measures a doorway. Someone else examines the basement. Safe still there. Nuclear shelter. Empty staff quarters. This is where a king died. May 28, 1972. Edward, Duke of Windsor. Throat cancer. 77 years old. His wife beside him. This is where his wife lived alone for 14 years after that. Wallis, Duchess of Windsor, increasingly reclusive. Dementia setting in late 1970s. Lost speech in 1980. Bedridden until she died. April the 24th, 1986. 89 years old. For those 14 years, the staff still addressed her as Your Royal Highness. This was a title she was never actually granted. The letters patent of 1937 explicitly denied it. His wife and descendants, if any, shall not hold said title or attribute. Clear, legal, denied. But the staff said it anyway, every day. Even in the final 6 years, when she could not respond, when she had lost speech entirely, Your Royal Highness required performance maintained fiction. The restoration workers do not think about this as they make their lists. They think about limestone and HVAC systems and geothermal heating. They think about opening to the public, museum hours, ticket prices, accessibility. They are asking questions about preservation, what can be saved, what is too damaged, how to install modern climate control without destroying historical integrity. These are good questions, important questions. But there are other questions, harder questions. Questions the archive does not easily answer because the archive was never designed to preserve certain kinds of information. This is Villa Windsor. Before this, it was a mausoleum where Al-Fayed kept a fantasy alive with $12 million in restoration costs. Before that, a stage where the Duke and Duchess entertained European aristocracy and Hollywood celebrities. Before that, a cage, gilded, beautiful, rented for $50 per year. This is a story about 3 houses, a chateau on the French Riviera, where 33 blonde employees worked for 11 years, a government mansion in the Bahamas where a murder investigation collapsed, and this villa in Paris where 15 people lived in the basement for 33 years. Each house gilded, each house beautiful, each house maintained by people whose wages we do not know, whose names we cannot find, whose thoughts were never recorded. The restoration continues. The workers measure and photograph and plan. The museum will open eventually. Visitors will enter. They will see something true. They will not see everything. The question is not what these walls can tell us about architecture. The question is, what did these walls cost and who paid? Can you buy your way out of exile if you never truly own anything? December 10th, 1936, Fort Belvedere, Windsor Great Park, a desk, mahogany, ordinary enough. A man sits at it, holding a pen. Edward Albert Christian George Andrew Patrick David Windsor, King of the United Kingdom and British Dominions, Emperor of India. Until December 11th. He signs the instrument of abdication, his hand steady, the paper legal and final. His Majesty's Declaration of Abdication Act will pass Parliament the next day. Done. From King Emperor to simply, what? The broadcast goes out, December 11th. Largest radio audience in history to that point. 40 million people listening. His voice, calm, measured. The script polished by Winston Churchill. The words now famous. I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do without the help and support of the woman I love. What he does not say, he has just secured £300,000 for 2 properties. Sandringham House, Balmoral Castle, his personal property, inherited from his father, George V. His brother needs them. The new king, George VI, must buy them back. £300,000, equivalent to somewhere between £23.8 million and £173 million in 2024 values, depending on which inflation measure you use. Paid in annual installments, over years, a revenue stream, an annuity from abdication. What he also does not say, he has lied about his wealth. When negotiating the allowance with his brother, he claimed assets of £100,000. Total. This is the number he gave. This is the number they used to calculate what he would need. His actual fortune over £1 million, possibly much more. 26 years of Duchy of Cornwall revenues. The income meant for the heir, invested, growing quietly, compounding. He concealed this, deliberately, to extract a larger allowance from the brother he had just forced onto a throne neither wanted. George VI will pay the Duke's allowance personally, not from the civil list. The government refused to include the Duke or Duchess there. So George pays, out of his own accounts, a brother supporting a brother, except it is built on deception. The phone calls start immediately, daily. The Duke calling from France, importuning for money, demanding that Wallis be granted the style, Her Royal Highness, pushing, insisting, daily, until the harassed king orders the palace switchboard, do not put the calls through. The family rift opens here. It will never close. In 1939, Edward writes to his mother, Queen Mary, your last letter destroyed the last vestige of feeling I had left for you and has made further normal correspondence between us impossible. The wound is financial and emotional and permanent. The math is simple. 326 days as king, Edward VIII, crowned January 20th, abdicated December 11th, shortest reign since Lady Jane Grey in 1553, 50 years ahead as Duke of Windsor, dependent on an allowance, living in houses he does not own, maintaining appearances he cannot afford, supplementing income through book royalties and what multiple sources delicately term illegal currency trading. On March 8, 1937, he becomes Duke of Windsor. His brother grants him the title, the style Royal Highness, but not for her. The letters patent are explicit. May 27, 1937. His wife and descendants, if any, shall not hold said title or attribute. She will never be Her Royal Highness, legally, officially, no matter how many staff members he requires to say it. This is what a crown weighs in actual currency, £300,000 paid over time, an allowance whose amount remains somewhat obscured in historical records but appears to be around £10,000 per year. Tax exemptions negotiated with foreign governments. Peppercorn rent on a Parisian villa. Charity disguised as privilege. And in exchange, he gives up the throne, the empire, the duty, the crown, the only job he was born to do. The desk where he signed the abdication will be auctioned in 1997. Sotheby's, along with 10,000 photographs and a doll from Queen Mary, and jewelry worth $50 million. Scattered, sold, distributed to strangers. But in December 1936, the desk is just a desk. The decision just made. The future uncertain. What is the exchange rate between a crown and a life? He's about to spend 50 years finding out. Cap d'Antibes, French Riviera, May 1938. The Château de la Croix rises from 17 acres of peninsula. Victorian architecture inspired by Château de Bagatelle. 12 bedrooms, 8 master suites with private bathrooms, 6 staff rooms. Built 1927 for Sir William Pomeroy Burton, president of Associated Newspapers, architect Armand Albert Rateau. The Duke and Duchess of Windsor sign a 10-year lease. They have been married 1 year, exiled from Britain, living in borrowed houses, moving between hotels and the homes of friends, never settling, never quite belonging. This will be different. This will be theirs. Rented, yes, but theirs. The Duchess begins immediately. English furnishings shipped across the Channel, fabrics, paintings, silver, crystal. She oversees everything, writes letters to decorators, makes lists, changes her mind, makes new lists. The house had been raddled by temporary inmates. She will fix that. Writer Rebecca West visits. She observes something remarkable. She later writes, there are not many women who can pick up the keys to a rented house, raddled by long submission to temporary inmates, and make it look as if a family of good taste had been living there for 2 or 3 centuries. This is a compliment. It is also something else. an acknowledgement of the performance, the effort required to make rented feel owned, temporary feel permanent, exile feel chosen. Making it work requires staff. At peak operations, 33 employees, cooks, maids, groundskeepers, drivers, valets, housekeepers. The machinery that makes a chateau function, that makes elegance appear effortless. We know one thing about these 33 people. A single detail preserved in the historical record. A housekeeper who worked there later took a position at Chatsworth House. She told the Duchess of Devonshire something that struck the Duchess as worth remembering. All the staff employed at the Château de la Croix by the Windsors were blonde-haired. All of them. Blonde. This was 1938. A requirement. A specification when hiring. The implications, given the political climate of Europe in 1938, are unavoidable. Your skills matter, your experience matters, and your hair must be blonde. We do not know why. We do not know their names. We do not know their wages or hours or what they thought about this requirement or anything else. We know they were blonde. The archive preserves this. The archive does not preserve much else. The Windsors entertain. The Devonshires come to dinner. The Duke wears full Highland dress, kilt, dirk at his side. A Highland piper plays. The Duchess of Devonshire remembers this decades later. She writes that it seemed more suited to the misty glens than the Côte d'Azur in July. July. Mediterranean heat, stone terrace, Highland bagpipes. A former king in ceremonial dress designed for Scottish moors, playing at a majesty he no longer has, performing a Scotland he rarely visits, creating theatre because theatre is all that remains. The 33 blonde staff serve dinner, 7 courses probably, wine pairings, champagne. The crystal catches candlelight. The linens are pressed. The Duke tells stories about his time as Prince of Wales. The Duchess ensures glasses stay filled. The piper plays. Everyone is polite. Winston and Clementine Churchill come in 1948. Their 40th wedding anniversary. Toasts, speeches, celebration of enduring love. The Windsors host. 10 years married themselves by then. 10 years in exile. The war over. France recovering. The chateau survived occupation. So did they. Churchill raises a glass. To 40 years. To constancy. To love that lasts. The staff pour champagne. Clear plates. Maintain the illusion that this is normal. That this is how people live. That chateaus run themselves. The lease expires spring 1949. 11 years. The Windsors do not renew. They move on. The chateau changes hands. Aristotle Onassis buys it in 1950. Sells it 1957 after his wife discovers him in bed with her friend. Stavros Niarchos purchases next. Fire damages it severely around 1970. It sits abandoned roughly 30 years. Roman Abramovich buys it 2001. Spends over 33 million euros on restoration. Completed 2008. Adds 15-meter rooftop pool. Basement cinema. Fitness center. The house comes back. More beautiful than before. More expensive. More private. 33 million euros. 33 employees. The numbers echo. We know how much the restoration cost. We do not know how much the staff earned. We know the pool is 15 meters. We do not know a single worker's name. We know the Duke wore Highland dress in July. We do not know what the 33 blonde people thought when they saw it. The archive chooses what to preserve, what to remember. Architectural details survive. Labor vanishes. Material costs recorded. Human costs erased. Can you furnish a rented chateau into forgetting you gave up an empire? Can you hire 33 people and require blonde hair and never write down why. Can you make something beautiful enough that no one asks who polished the floors? What does it mean that we know their hair color but not their names? September 3rd, 1939. Britain declares war on Germany. France follows hours later. The machinery of Europe begins its violent reorganization. Men mobilize. Factories convert. Borders harden. The Riviera, playground of the wealthy, becomes something else. Strategic coastline. Potential invasion route. No longer safe. The Duke of Windsor has a brief war assignment. Liaison officer with the British military mission to France. He inspects the Maginot Line, writes reports, accurate reports, as it turns out. He identifies French unpreparedness, weak defences, low morale. His assessments prove correct. They are also ignored. The Château de la Croix sits on Cap d'Antibes. The 33 blonde staff members remain. Someone has to maintain the house, even if the Duke and Duchess are rarely there, even if war makes entertaining impossible. The house still needs care. We do not know what happened to these 33 people, whether they were paid during the Duke's absence, whether they stayed or left, whether they had families who needed them elsewhere, whether they were conscripted, whether they survived what came next. The archive does not record this. The Duke's war service is documented, his reports preserved, his movements tracked. But the people who kept his chateau running silence. June 1940. France falls. The Duke and Duchess flee. Antibes to Biarritz. Then Spain. Then Portugal. Moving ahead of German advance. No visas. Gambling on borders letting them through. They make it, barely. The 33 staff do not flee. Presumably, they are French citizens. This is their country, their home. The Germans occupy the Riviera. The Château de la Croix sits under occupation. The house survives. We know this because it is still there. Someone must have maintained it, protected it, kept it from being requisitioned or destroyed. We do not know who. In August 1940, the Duke receives his next assignment, Governor of the Bahamas, British colony in the Caribbean, far from Europe, far from the war. The appointment is presented as important duty. It is actually removal. Churchill wants him away from the continent, away from German influence. The Bahamas solves the problem. The Duke understands this. He tells someone later, "It is very hard, once you have been King Emperor, to govern the Bahamas." He means it as complaint, as expression of how beneath him the work feels. But the sentence contains truth he does not intend. It is hard, because you are not an emperor. You are a governor of a small island. Real problems, real people, not theoretical empire, actual governance. The Duke and Duchess sail for Nassau, August 1940. They will stay 5 years, until March 1945. The war's duration plus a few months. Safe, removed, governing an island while Europe burns. The Château de la Croix sits empty, occupied France. German soldiers probably billeted nearby. Maybe in the house itself. The historical record is unclear. What is clear, the house survives the war. Furniture intact, structure undamaged beyond normal wear. Someone cared for it. The 33 blonde people, or some of them, or new people. We do not know. France is liberated August 1944. The war in Europe ends May 1945. Reconstruction begins. Millions dead, cities destroyed, economies shattered. The work of rebuilding occupies a generation. The Duke and Duchess return to France eventually. Not immediately. Not to the chateau. They have decided not to renew the lease. 11 years there. But the war changed things, made the Riviera feel different, made staying feel impossible. The chateau passes to new owners, Aristotle Onassis, then others. The house continues. The staff who maintained it during occupation vanish from the record, their service unacknowledged, their survival unremarked, their names lost. When war comes, the powerful escape to islands, the staff remain. The powerful write memoirs, the staff leave no record. The powerful complain about assignments beneath them. The staff do the work that keeps houses standing through occupation and bombardment and years of uncertainty. Who serves when war comes? Everyone. But not equally. Not with equal recognition. Not with equal preservation in the archive. What happens to the 33 when their employers flee? The chateau does not answer. The limestone keeps its secrets. The Mediterranean keeps pushing at the shore. Nassau, the Bahamas, August 1940. The Duke and Duchess step off the liner Excalibur into tropical heat. They have escaped Europe, escaped Operation Willy, escaped the SS agents, and the stone-throwing and the German offers, and the month of uncertainty in Portugal. Churchill has sent them here. Governor of the Bahamas, 5 years, duration of the war plus margin. Government House waits on Mount Fitzwilliam, built 1806, Georgian colonial architecture, stuccoed coral rock, original cost over £20,000. It should be impressive. It is not. A cracked and flaking edifice, termite damage in the walls. Chunk of ceiling plaster falls into the drawing room while the Duchess is sitting there. She writes to her aunt, Bessie Merriman. In September. Together we are going to dish this shack up so that at least one is not ashamed of asking the local horrors here. Local horrors. This is what she calls the people of Nassau in her letter. The racism is casual, documented, part of the historical record that must be acknowledged. The House of Assembly allocates $6,000 for renovations. The Windsors spend $21,000, $15,000 more than authorized. Much of it their own money. They have standards. They have needs. $6,000 will not cover it. The Duchess oversees everything. New York wallpapers imported. Natural rattan baseboards. Modernistic with Regency touches. Frankly smart. A Life magazine profile later describes the transformation. One room painted the same shade of her favorite face powder. Exact match, precise shade. A table surface ornamented with a 3-foot replica of her signature. Her name in script, 3 feet wide, permanent. She wants to remove the front door, old, battered, historic, survived the hurricane of 1929, survived everything, but she finds it ugly. She is denied. Compromise, she can cover the upper half with black glass panel. On the glass, printed in white Honiswat, Kimal e Pens. Shame on him who thinks evil of it. The motto of the Order of the Garter, royal proclamation on a colonial door. During renovation, they stay at Sigrist House, built 1930s by Sir Frederick Sigris, British aviation pioneer and movie producer. 15,000 square feet, 4 acres on Cable Beach overlooking Goodman's Bay, 15 bedrooms, 13 bathrooms, Spanish colonial style with English imported woodwork and fireplaces, a palace by any measure. Modern real estate listings value it at $8.5 million. They use it as temporary quarters. When they move back into Government House, it includes a new addition, the Windsor Wing, built 1940 to 1944, specifically to accommodate the Duke's personal staff. Colonial government funds constructing private apartments. The wing still exists today. The Duke tries to govern. He visits the out islands, sees poverty, real poverty. He writes, "I have personally rarely seen such slums and squalor as exist in most of the native settlements." He proposes development, £400,000 over 8 years from the House of Assembly, infrastructure, roads, schools. Some reforms happen, some improvements made. Etienne Dupuche, editor of the Daily Tribune, watches, initially critical, eventually softens. Later says the Duke was genuinely trying to do his best for the islands and the people. Trying. The word matters. Trying is not succeeding. Trying is effort that may or may not produce results. Trying is what you say when someone means well, but lacks the skills or temperament or understanding to actually accomplish the task. The Duke governs while believing governance beneath him. He tells someone it is very hard, once you have been King Emperor, to govern the Bahamas. The sentence reveals everything: the resentment, the sense of diminishment, the gap between what he was and what he has become. He visits slums, then returns to Government House, where a room is painted the color of his wife's face powder and a table bears a 3-foot replica of her signature. He proposes £400,000 for infrastructure while his renovation runs $15,000 over budget. He calls Bahamians local horrors while depending on them to make his exile livable. The contradictions pile up. The gulf between intention and action widens. Someone is trying. Someone means well. Someone is genuinely making effort. And then, in July 1943, someone close to him dies. Murdered. Brutally. In a way that requires investigation, requires competence, requires setting aside ego and resentment and the belief that this work is beneath you. The Duke will fail that test, catastrophically. But right now, in 1941, the house is renovated. The Duchess is pleased. The black glass panel covers the historic door. The signature gleams. The face powder room glows exactly right. Can you renovate your way out of exile? Who cleaned the room, painted the color of face powder? What do you call people local horrors, and then expect them to serve you with dignity? The questions accumulate. The storm is building. Paris, 1949. The Duke and Duchess leave the Riviera. The chateau lease expires. They do not renew. 11 years there. 33 blonde staff. Churchill's anniversary. Highland dress in July heat. All of it behind them now. They need somewhere to live. Not rent temporarily. Not borrow from friends. Actually live, settle, make permanent. First attempt. 85 Rue de la Faisanderie. Former home of William K. Vanderbilt Jr., American Railroad fortune, old money by American standards. The house is available. The Windsors take it. Decidedly smaller than their previous residences, but adequate. Presumably. It is not adequate. The Duchess finds the house uncomfortable. The Duke agrees. They never settle, never relax. The dining room particularly bothers them. It only seats 24. Only. 24 people. A dinner party for 24 guests insufficient. Too small. Too limiting. How can you entertain properly when you can only seat 24? This is not theoretical complaint. This is genuine distress. The Windsors measure their worth in entertaining capacity, in how many aristocrats and celebrities and hangers-on can gather around a table. 24 is poverty. 24 is embarrassment. They stay 4 years at Rue de la Faisanderie. Uncomfortable years. Searching years. Looking for something better. Something right. Something that feels like home instead of temporary shelter. In 1952, they find it, or buy it, or the British government releases funds and makes it possible. Le Moulin de la Tuilerie, the mill, Gif-sur-Yvette, 12 miles southwest of Paris in the Essonne Valley, 26 acres, 6 properties on the estate, main house, outbuildings, a polo pitch, extensive gardens. The Duke can cultivate his passion for gardening here. Actually, work the land, dig in soil, plant things, watch them grow. This is the first and only property the Duke and Duchess of Windsor ever purchase. Think about that. Married June 3rd, 1937. Living in exile 16 years by the time they buy the moulin. 16 years of rented chateaux and borrowed houses and temporary arrangements and leases. 16 years of depending on other people's property, other people's generosity, other people's willingness to accommodate exiled royalty. Now, finally, ownership, something theirs, not borrowed, not rented, not granted at peppercorn rates by governments feeling charitable, purchased, deeded, owned. The British government releases funds for the purchase. The mechanics unclear. Whether it is a loan or a gift or a complicated arrangement involving trust funds and allowances restructured. The historical record does not specify. What is clear, they could not have bought it without governmental assistance. Even this ownership is not quite independent. They hire Stéphane Boudin to decorate, the same man who will later work with Jacqueline Kennedy on the White House restoration. He understands elegance, understands how to make spaces feel both grand and livable. He transforms the moulin into something beautiful. The Duchess commissions wall art, a piece for one of the rooms. Text chosen carefully, personal. I am not the miller's daughter, but I have been through the mill. Not the miller's daughter, not born to this life of literal mills and French countryside estates, not from this world of old European money and property passed down through generations. An American, a divorced American, a woman who married into this world and paid for entrance with everything else. But I have been through the mill, been processed, been broken down and reconstituted, been put through machinery that grinds, that pressures, that transforms. 16 years of exile, 16 years of not quite belonging, 16 years of making rented houses feel owned and owned houses feel adequate. The wall art hangs in the moulin. Visitors see it. Some understand. Some smile politely. Some miss the pain underneath the clever phrasing. In 2019, Le Moulin de la Tuileries lists for £5.6 million, roughly $7.3 million, 26 acres, 6 properties, historic significance, former home of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, the only property they ever owned, only, the word again, only 24 seats, only one owned property, only one place in 50 years of marriage where they could say this is actually ours. What does it mean to live your entire adult life in other people's houses? What does it mean that ownership came 16 years into exile and only with government assistance? What does 24 dinner seats represent when you have given up an empire? The mill grinds. The Duchess knows this. She put it on the wall. Permanent reminder. I have been through the mill. Still going through. The machinery never stops. Paris, Bois de Boulogne, 1953. The Duke and Duchess sign a lease for Villa Windsor, $50 per year. Some sources say 10. The number almost does not matter. Peppercorn rent, symbolic. The kind of arrangement that signals charity disguised as privilege. The city of Paris owns the property. Built 1928 to 1929 by architect Roger Bouvard for Henri Lillas. 14 rooms, 12,700 square feet, 2.7 acres, cut limestone construction, reception room ceilings 15 feet high, Louis XV and Louis XVI styling mixed with Art Deco. The previous occupant, Charles de Gaulle, 1944 to 1946. Post-liberation, he used the first floor as an office, received Léon Blum there, André Malraux, Jacques Chirac. Government business conducted in these rooms. The residence furnished in under 5 days for official functions. De Gaulle chose it over the Élysée Palace. Then moved on. Now the Windsors move in. Walter Monckton, the Duke's advisor, negotiates terms with the French government. The rent is nominal, but the real value comes in exemptions. No income tax, no duty on foreign purchases, no taxes on investment profits, free security. The French government subsidizing exiled British royalty. Quietly, discreetly. The Duchess hires Maison Jansen, Parisian decorating firm. She supervises everything, again, as she has done at the Chateau, at Government House, at the Moulin. Making spaces reflect the status she believes she deserves, the status legally denied. The basement contains a safe, large, for the jewelry collection, also a nuclear shelter. You never know. The Cold War makes basement bunkers fashionable among those who can afford them. And the Windsors, despite peppercorn rent, can afford this. The basement also contains staff quarters, 15 people, maybe more. Exact number varies in sources, but minimum 15, living below, maintaining above. They address the Duchess as Your Royal Highness every day. This is required. This is not optional. The letters patent of May 27, 1937 explicitly denied her this title. His wife and descendants, if any, shall not hold said title or attribute. Legal, clear, denied. She requires it anyway. The staff comply. Your Royal Highness, morning, noon, night, for 19 years while the Duke lives, then another 14 after he dies. 33 years total. 33 years of saying a title that legally does not exist. The household operates in English only, French forbidden. This is Paris. This is France. The country that has given them a home when Britain would not. That charges them $50 yearly for a mansion. That exempts them from taxes. That provides security. And in this French house, in this French city, French is banned. The staff must speak English. Orders given in English. Conversations conducted in English. The Duchess's will imposed on every interaction. They entertain. Marlene Dietrich comes. Aristotle Onassis. Elizabeth Taylor. The Aga Khan. European aristocracy. Hollywood celebrities. People who want proximity to former royalty. People who collect famous friends. Queen Elizabeth II visits. The niece who became queen when her father became king, when the Duke abdicated. She comes to Villa Windsor. Pays respects. Prince Charles visits too. The next generation. Maintaining connection. Acknowledging the exile without ending it. In 1963, photographer Horst P. Horst shoots the villa for Vogue. He is impressed. Deeply. He writes, "It is hard to believe that there can ever have been an interior more surpassingly clean, where crystal was more genuinely scintillating and porcelain more luminous, or where wood and leather, polished to the consistency of precious stone, could more truthfully be said to shine. Polished to the consistency of precious stone. Passive voice, as if wood polishes itself, as if scintillation appears spontaneously, as if luminosity requires no human effort. 15 people in the basement make it scintillate. 15 people polish wood and leather and crystal and porcelain. Every day. For decades. Their names unrecorded. Their wages undocumented. Their thoughts about calling a woman Your Royal Highness when she legally is not. Those thoughts vanish into silence. The Duke's fortune in 1953, £3 million. Substantial, but not enough to buy this house. Not enough to maintain it independently. Hence peppercorn rent. Hence tax exemptions. Hence French government charity. This is the golden cage. Beautiful. Expensive to maintain. Subsidized by others. Occupied under terms that make clear you are here because we allow it. Not because you can afford it. Not because you own it. Because we permit it. What is the psychological cost of a $50 palace? Can you command your Royal Highness into existence through repetition, who polishes leather to precious stone and then disappears from the archive? The crystal scintillates, the porcelain glows. The Duke and Duchess entertain, and in the basement, 15 people maintain the illusion. Villa Windsor, May 28, 1972. The Duke lies in bed, throat cancer. He has been a lifelong smoker, cigarettes and pipes, decades of smoke. Now the price comes due. 77 years old, 56 since abdication, 35 married to the woman beside him. Wallis sits with him, the Duchess, not Her Royal Highness, never that, legally. But everyone in this house calls her that anyway, have called her that for 19 years, will continue for 14 more. Queen Elizabeth II visited days earlier. The niece, the sovereign. She came to Paris, entered Villa Windsor, sat with her uncle, the man who was briefly king, the man who gave up the throne so her father could take it, so she could inherit it. What they said to each other remains private. Whether there was reconciliation or simply courtesy, whether old wounds acknowledged or ignored, the archive does not record. Some conversations vanish even when witnesses present. The Duke dies late morning. The Duchess holds his hand or sits nearby. Sources vary on exact configuration. What is certain, she is there, present, after 56 years of exile, 35 years of marriage, 19 years in this house, she is there when it ends. The body is prepared for transport. Britain wants him back. The royal family claims him in death if not in life. Funeral at Windsor, St. George's Chapel. Then burial at the Royal Burial Ground, Frogmore, near the castle, not in it. Proximity without full inclusion. Geography as metaphor. The Duchess does not accompany the body immediately. She follows later, attends the funeral, stands with the family, black veil, mourning clothes, performs the widow, then returns to Paris, to Villa Windsor, to the house where he died, the house they rented for $50 yearly, the house she will occupy alone 14 more years. Alone. The word matters. She has defined herself through him since 1934. Wallis Simpson, who became Wallis Windsor, the woman he gave up the crown for, the twice-divorced American who split the British Empire. Her identity constructed entirely in relation to his choice, his sacrifice, his abdication. Now he is gone. The architecture of her life collapses. Who is she without him? The answer will take 14 years to reveal, and the revelation will be brutal. The house continues. The staff continues. 15 people in the basement. They still call her Your Royal Highness. Still forbidden to speak French. Still polishing crystal to scintillation and wood to precious stone. The routines do not change because one person dies. But something fundamental has shifted. The Duke and Duchess were a unit, a story, a romance, a scandal. Together they made sense. Together they justified the exile. Together they maintained the performance. Apart, the performance reveals its scaffolding, the effort required, the subsidy needed, the charity underneath. She is 75 years old. alone in 14 rooms, 2.7 acres, 15-foot ceilings, a basement safe full of jewelry, a nuclear shelter that will never be used, staff quarters occupied by people who call her a title she does not legally possess. The Duke wanted to be buried at Frogmore, near Windsor Castle, as close to royalty as they would permit. He is there now, stone and soil and English ground, returned, accepted in death. She remains in Paris, in a house that is not hers, paying $50 yearly, living on charity disguised as privilege, the widow of a man who gave up everything for her. What remains when the king dies but the crown never returns? A woman, alone, in a rented mansion, surrounded by staff who perform titles, and 14 years stretching ahead, empty, uncertain, inevitable. The crystal still scintillates, the porcelain still glows, someone still polishes the wood, but the Duke is gone, and what comes next will be harder than anyone imagines. Villa Windsor, 1972 to 1986, 14 years. The Duchess lives them alone. At first, she maintains routines. Entertaining becomes rare but happens. A few close friends, occasional visitors. She oversees the house, tells the staff what needs doing, where things should go, how things should look. The performance continues, but the house is too large for one person. 14 rooms, 12,700 square feet, built for a couple, built for entertaining, built for the Duke and Duchess, plural, not singular. She moves through empty spaces, reception rooms with 15-foot ceilings, dining room set for one, or not set at all. The crystal that was scintillating, the porcelain that was luminous, still there, still polished. But for whom the staff remains. 15 people in the basement. Their job has not changed. Maintain the house, keep everything clean, keep everything ready, as if guests might arrive, as if dinner parties might resume, as if the Duke might return. They still address her as Your Royal Highness. Every morning, every interaction, Your Royal Highness. The title legally denied 39 years earlier. The title she has required for 39 years. The title that will continue to be spoken even when she can no longer hear it. Late 1970s. Dementia sets in. Progressive. Inevitable. The mind that planned the Chateau de la Croix decorations. That oversaw government house renovations. That supervised every detail of Villa Windsor's transformation. That mind begins to fail. Memory goes first, then judgment, then recognition. The Duchess becomes confused, disoriented, unable to manage the household, unable to give directions, unable to maintain the performance that has defined her existence. 1980. She loses speech entirely, not gradually, not with warning. One capability among many declining, but the specific, brutal loss words gone. Communication severed, locked inside a failing mind, in a failing body, in a house too large. The staff still says it. Your Royal Highness. Good morning, Your Royal Highness. Can I bring you anything? Your Royal Highness. Every day, to a woman who cannot respond, who cannot acknowledge, who may not even understand what is being said. Why do they continue orders from someone, executors, lawyers, the household system maintaining momentum after its reason has vanished? Or maybe the staff themselves cannot imagine stopping. 33 years of saying Your Royal Highness creates its own gravity, its own inevitability. She becomes bedridden. Final years. Someone must provide round-the-clock care. The intimate, exhausting work of caring for someone bedridden and unable to speak. Sit with her, hour after hour, day after day, month after month. We do not know who. Names unrecorded, wages undocumented. The labor intensive and intimate and exhausting. Caring for someone bedridden is work that never stops. That requires patience and strength and emotional reserves that deplete faster than they replenish. Caring for someone who cannot speak means guessing. Is she in pain? Does she need repositioning? Is she comfortable, hungry, thirsty, frightened? The caregiver must interpret, must guess, must try, and the whole time calling her Your Royal Highness. The absurdity almost too much. The tragedy almost unbearable. A woman speechless and bedridden. A caregiver required to use a title that was never granted. The performance maintained for an audience of one who cannot perceive it. The house decays around her. Maintenance reduces. The Duchess cannot supervise, cannot notice, cannot care. Things slide. Paint chips, wood dulls, the scintillation fades, the luminosity dims. In 1963, Horst P. Horst said it was hard to believe there could be an interior more surpassingly clean. In 1986, it is hard to believe this is the same house. 14 years of reduced care. 14 years of one person rattling around alone. 14 years of dementia and speechlessness and decline. April 24th, 1986. The Duchess dies. Same bedroom where the Duke died. Same house. Same bed. Perhaps. 89 years old. 14 years alone. The staff can finally stop saying, Your Royal Highness. The performance ends. The fiction collapses. The house empties. What remains? A building falling into disrepair. Jewelry in a safe. Furniture that will be auctioned. And silence. Finally, after 14 years, after 33 years of staff saying a title that did not exist, after 89 years of a life defined by one choice, one man made 50 years earlier, silence. The house waits, empty again, ready for the next chapter, the next owner, the next performance. After the Duchess died, Villa Windsor passed to Mohammed Al Fayed. He signed a 50-year lease, spent $12 million restoring it to 1963 perfection, called it a mausoleum. His son, Dodi, brought Princess Diana here in August 1997. They stayed 30 minutes. The next day, they died in Paris. In 2018, Al Fayed returned the lease 18 years early. The house sat empty 5 more years. Stop here. Before we continue, before the next owner, before the restoration, before the ending, count the invisible, Château de la Croix, 1938 to 1949, 33 employees at peak. We know one thing about them, one single preserved detail. They were blonde-haired, all of them. A requirement in 1938. We do not know their names. We do not know their wages. We do not know what happened when war came, whether they were paid during occupation, whether they survived, when the Windsors left in 1949 and never returned. What happened to these 33 people? The archive is silent. Government House, Nassau, 1940 to 1945. Someone renovated that building. Someone installed New York wallpapers. Someone painted a room the exact shade of the Duchess's favorite face powder. Someone built a table bearing a 3-foot replica of her signature. Budget $6,000. Actual cost $21,000. Someone did $15,000 of additional work. We do not know who. We do not know their wages. We know the Duchess called them local horrors. We do not know if they heard this. We do not know if they resented it. Villa Windsor, 1953 to 1986. 15 people minimum. Housed in basement, next to the jewelry safe. next to the nuclear shelter. 33 years. Some must have been there the entire time, longer than the Duke's reign and Château Exile combined. 33 years calling a woman Your Royal Highness when the title was explicitly denied her by letters patent of 1937. And then 6 more years, 1980 to 1986, calling her Your Royal Highness when she could not respond, when she had lost speech, when she was bedridden. Someone fed her, bathed her, turned her, sat with her. 6 years of intimate, exhausting, invisible work. We do not know who. Horst P. Horst photographed the villa in 1963. He wrote that wood and leather were polished to the consistency of precious stone. Polished, passive voice, as if wood polishes itself, as if consistency of precious stone appears spontaneously. Someone polished that wood. Every day. For decades. Someone made the crystal scintillate. Someone made the porcelain luminous. Someone kept everything surpassingly clean. Someone. We do not know who. The pattern holds. 3 estates, 50 years, 3 countries, multiple owners, names lost, wages lost, conditions lost, labor essential, recognition absent. We know the Duke received £300,000 for Sandringham and Balmoral. We know he concealed his true wealth. We know he supplemented income with illegal currency trading. We know Villa Windsor rented for $50 yearly. We do not know how much anyone was paid to make it habitable. We know the Duchess's jewellery auctioned for $50 million in 1987. We know Elizabeth Taylor bought pieces. We do not know the name of one person who cleaned the safe where jewellery was kept. This is not accident. This is choice. Archives preserve what owners own, receipts for houses, bills for jewellery, not what workers earn, not schedules, not conditions, not names. The silence is evidence. Evidence of what we choose to remember and what we choose to forget. Whose story survives and whose silence do we accept? Here is what we know about money. The Duke received £300,000 for Sandringham and Balmoral. He concealed over £1 million in assets when negotiating his allowance. He supplemented income through illegal currency trading. He wrote 2 books that sold moderately well. The Duchess accumulated jewellery worth $50 million at auction. She spent lavishly on decorations at the Chateau, at Government House, at Villa Windsor. She commissioned custom pieces from Cartier. She required rooms painted exact shades. Villa Windsor cost $50 yearly in rent. Tax exemptions saved thousands more. Free security. Free maintenance on the building itself. Subsidies disguised as privilege. Here is what we do not know about money. How much the 33 blonde employees at Château de la Croix earned. Whether they were paid during the war. What happened to their wages when the lease ended? How much Bahamian workers earned during the $21,000 government house renovation? Whether the $15,000 over budget went to labor or materials? What local wages looked like compared to imported New York wallpapers? How much the 15 basement staff at Villa Windsor earned? Whether they received raises over 33 years? What their living conditions cost? Whether housing was deducted from pay? The gap between what we know and what we do not know is not random. It is structural. Archives preserve property transactions, jewelry appraisals, book royalties. Illegal currency trading gets documented because authorities investigate. Worker wages, basement living conditions, hours worked, days off. These things existed, had to exist. You cannot run a chateau, a government house, a villa without paying people, without housing them, without establishing terms. But the terms were not considered historically significant. not worth preserving, not part of the story people wanted to tell. So we know the Duke wore Highland dress at the chateau in July heat. We do not know who laundered the kilt afterward. We know the Duchess required a room painted the shade of her face powder. We do not know who painted it, or how many coats it took, or whether they thought the request absurd. We know crystal scintillated, and porcelain was luminous, and wood was polished to consistency of precious stone. We do not know who did the polishing, how long it took, whether their hands cramped, whether they resented the work, or took pride in it, or felt nothing at all. We know the Duchess lost speech in 1980 and stayed bedridden 6 years until death. We do not know who fed her, who bathed her, who turned her to prevent sores, who sat with her in the long hours, who called her Your Royal Highness when she could not hear. The cost of the dream was not just $50 yearly rent. The cost was 33 people in France, unknown number in the Bahamas, 15 minimum in Paris, decades of labor, millions of hours accumulated across 3 estates, 3 countries, 50 years. The cost was requiring blonde hair, banning French, enforcing titles that did not legally exist, maintaining performances that required entire supporting casts whose names we do not have. Why do we know ceiling height but not one maid's name? Because archives preserve what owners own. Because history records transactions, not labor. Because the price of maintaining aristocratic fantasy includes erasing the people who maintain it. The Duke and Duchess paid money, rent, wages, something. They had to. But they also extracted something else: silence, anonymity. The agreement that your work makes my life possible, but your name does not enter the record. Who carried the cost? We know who. We just do not know their names. And that anonymity, that systematic erasure, is part of how the cost was paid. 3 estates, 50 years. What do they reveal about class? The Duke received £300,000 for properties his father left him. His brother paid personally. Yet the Duke could not afford to buy a house in Paris, could not maintain a chateau without leasing, lived on peppercorn rent, $50 yearly, charity disguised as privilege. He appeared royal, entertained celebrities, wore Highland dress, collected jewelry, but underneath dependence, the allowance from his brother, the subsidies from France, the illegal currency trading to supplement income. The gap between appearance and reality was the story. Royalty performed on a pensioner's budget. About exile, you cannot go home, but you cannot fully arrive elsewhere either. The Château de la Croix was England recreated on French Riviera, English furnishings, English staff requirements. Trying to make the Mediterranean feel like Berkshire. It never worked. The Bahamas. It is very hard, once you have been King Emperor, to govern the Bahamas. The sentence reveals everything. The work felt beneath him because he measured it against kingship, not against governance, not against service, against what he used to be. Exile is permanent comparison, permanent failure to measure up. Villa Windsor, nominal rent revealing true status, the French government helping quietly, subsidizing discreetly, charitable without saying charity. The Duke and Duchess accepted it, because what choice did they have? 50 years past abdication, no way back, no way forward except accepting terms. About memory furniture survives, photographs survive, auction catalogues survive. We know what the crystal looked like, what the porcelain cost, how the rooms were arranged, what the Duchess wore, who visited. We do not know staff names, daily routines, basement conditions. Emotional reality of calling someone Your Royal Highness for 33 years when the title was denied. The archive preserves wealth transactions, not labor, not the people who made wealth visible. About love versus duty, the abdication framed as love story, greatest romance of the 20th century. King gave up everything. The woman he loved, beautiful sacrifice. Reality, 50 years of diminishing returns, rented houses, borrowed credibility, subsidized existence. The Duchess alone 14 years after Duke died, speechless 6 of those years, bedridden, requiring care from people whose names we do not have. She put it on the wall at Le Moulin. I am not the miller's daughter, but I have been through the mill, through, not past, through, present, continuous, grinding that does not stop. Was the choice worth it? The Duke gave up the crown, got what in return? 3 rented estates, 1 purchased property with government help, 35 years married, then death, then his wife alone 14 years. The Duchess gave up what 2 previous marriages, American society, some version of normal life, got what a title she could require staff to say but never legally possessed. Jewelry that sold for 50 million after she died. Dementia, speechlessness, 6 years bedridden. Who paid for the love story they did, obviously, but also 33 blonde employees, 15 basement staff, Bahamian workers called local horrors, everyone who polished and cleaned and cooked and maintained the illusion that exile was triumph, that renting was owning, that $50 yearly was not charity. The mansions mirror what we do not want to see, the cost of beauty, the people required to maintain it, the gap between the performance and the mechanism underneath, the silence where names should be. What truths do palace walls absorb, but never reveal all of them? The walls know who cleaned them, who painted them, who lived in the basement, who cried there, who resented the work, who took pride in it, who survived and who did not. The walls know, but walls do not speak. Archives speak, and archives chose long ago whose voice mattered. Two versions of this story exist, both widely told, both partially true. Version 1, romance. The king who gave up everything for love. The woman who inspired that sacrifice. Tragic exile. Beautiful homes as compensation. Devotion lasting decades. The greatest love story of the 20th century. Evidence. The abdication broadcast. The woman I love. Largest radio audience in history. The marriage lasting 35 years. The Duchess present when Duke died. Jewelry collection. Entertaining European elite. Growing old together. Version 2. Class critique. Selfish aristocrat choosing personal desire over duty. Leaving his brother with throne neither wanted. Living lavishly on subsidies. Staff maintaining fictions. Invisible labor sustaining visible elegance. Peppercorn rent revealing dependence. The Duchess calling Bahamians local horrors while requiring their service. Evidence, financial deception during allowance negotiation. Illegal currency trading. $50 yearly rent. 33 blonde staff members. Your Royal Highness required for denied title. Government house renovation costs. The gap between budget and reality. Both versions contain truth. Both omit things. The romance version omits the labor. The class version sometimes omits the genuine affection. Neither version centers the third story, the one told from the basement. What would that version sound like? We do not know. The voices were not recorded, or were recorded and lost, or were never considered worth preserving. We have fragments. The housekeeper who later worked at Chatsworth, she told the Duchess of Devonshire about the blonde hair requirement. That fragment survived because it struck someone aristocratic as worth remembering. Worth repeating, Sidney Johnson, the Duke's valet. He stayed with Al-Fayed as curator, told the New York Times in 1989. This is how it used to be, except there are no dogs around. This fragment survived because a reporter interviewed him, asked him questions, wrote down answers. 2 fragments from 50 years, 33 people at the chateau, unknown number in the Bahamas, 15 at Villa Windsor, decades of labor, millions of hours, 2 fragments preserved. What would comprehensive labor history reveal? We can guess. Probably long hours, modest pay, strict rules, the English-only requirement, the Your Royal Highness performance, the pressure to maintain perfection, the knowledge that your work makes their lives possible, but your name will not enter the record. Also, probably, pride in the work sometimes. The crystal did scintillate. The porcelain was luminous. Wood polished to consistency of precious stone takes skill, takes effort, takes sustained attention. Some workers probably took satisfaction in doing it well, maybe affection for employers, or not, resentment, or indifference. The emotional reality of serving people who live on charity disguised as privilege while you live in the basement, that reality was complex, varied by person, varied by day. We do not know because we did not ask, or asked, and did not preserve answers, or never considered the question worth asking. Archives preserve owner perspective, letters between royals, legal documents, financial ledgers, auction catalogues. These survive because people with power considered them worth saving, worth protecting, worth passing to future generations. Staff wages, shift schedules, basement living conditions, names, these existed, had to exist. You cannot run estates without documenting who works when, for what pay. But documentation either was not created or was not saved, or was saved and then discarded when owners changed, not considered historically significant. So whose version of the Windsor story survives? The version told by people who could write, who had time to write, whose letters someone saved, whose perspective someone valued. The other version, fragments, guesses, silence that we interpret as absence when it might be suppression or neglect, or the systematic choice across generations that some voices matter and others do not. What would the staff tell us? If we had asked, we will never know. The moment passed. The people died. The chance vanished. Why did we not ask? Because they were staff. Because their names were not important. Because the story was about the Duke and Duchess, about abdication and exile and love, not about the people who made that life physically possible. The choice of whose story to tell is the choice of whose humanity to recognize. We chose, repeatedly, across decades, across 3 estates. We chose the version that centers wealth and fame and scandal. We did not choose the version that centers labor. Now we live with that choice, and its consequences. A story half told, a history half preserved, a silence we cannot fill because we did not do the work of listening when listening was still possible. Villa Windsor, March 2023. Fondation Mansart begins work. Heritage Preservation Organization. Their mandate: transform private residence into public museum. Focus on 20th century decorative arts. Open to visitors. Make accessible what has been closed since 2018. The technical work is careful. Structural repairs to the 1929 limestone facade. Reinstating Louis XV and XVI elements. Installing decarbonized HVAC system. Geothermal heating. Air source heat pumps. Preserving historical interiors while meeting modern environmental standards. The house will show architectural significance. Roger Bouvar's design. The de Gaulle years, 1944 to 1946, when he used this villa rather than Élysée Palace. The Windsor era, 1953 to 1986. Decorative arts collections, period furniture, maybe clips from The Crown. The Netflix series filmed episodes here, made the house familiar to new generations. Important work, valuable work. Making history accessible is not trivial. Most people will never read archives, never visit research libraries, never spend hours with primary sources. Museums serve crucial function, translating scholarship into public access, making the past visible. But museums make choices: what to emphasize, what to include, what to omit due to space constraints or narrative clarity or curatorial priorities. Every museum tells a story, not the story, a story. The question: what story will Villa Windsor tell? Will visitors see the basement, the staff quarters where 15 people lived for 33 years? Will there be explanation of the Your Royal Highness requirement, the French language ban, the contrast between legal title and required performance? Will there be context about peppercorn rent, about what $50 yearly meant in 1953, about tax exemptions and subsidies, about the gap between appearance of wealth and reality of dependence? Will there be numbers? £300,000 for Sandringham and Balmoral, £1 million concealed during allowance negotiations, illegal currency trading, the mathematics of Exile, the actual cost of maintaining Gilded Cage. Will there be labour history, names if any can be recovered, wages if documentation exists, conditions, the effort required to keep crystal scintillating and wood polished to precious stone? Or will it be beautiful rooms and famous visitors and romantic tragedy, Duke and Duchess who gave up throne for love, lived in elegant exile, died in this house? End of story. Both approaches have validity. The romantic version is true. They did give up throne. They did love each other in whatever complex way love manifests across 50 years. The house is architecturally significant. The decorative arts matter, but the romantic version alone is incomplete. It omits half the people, the half in the basement, the half who made the visible life possible, the half whose names we do not have. Fondation Mansart is making these choices now, today, as workers restore limestone and install heat pumps and plan exhibition spaces. Curators are deciding which story, whose voice, what emphasis. These choices will shape what future generations learn. School groups will visit, tourists will tour. People will form impressions based on what the museum shows and what it does not show. If labour history is omitted, not through malice, but through standard curatorial practice of centering famous residents, then another generation learns palaces matter. People who lived in them matter. People who maintained them do not. The pattern continues. The silence deepens. The names stay lost, but it does not have to. The choice is happening now. The restoration is physical and interpretive. What gets restored to the facade can extend to the narrative. What gets preserved in limestone can include what gets told about the basement. The gates will open. Visitors will enter. They will see something beautiful, something important, something true. The question: will they see everything, or just what we have always shown? The three estates still stand. For now, Château de la Croix sits on Cap d'Antibes, Mediterranean eating slowly at the shore, erosion measurable, inevitable. Roman Abramovich's restoration will not last forever. Climate change accelerates, sea levels rise, storms intensify. At some point, The cost of defending waterfront property exceeds value. Economics meets physics. The ocean wins. Government House still operates in Nassau. Bahamas vulnerable to hurricanes. Always has been. Climate change makes them stronger, more frequent. The house survived 200 years. Will it survive 200 more? Ask the ocean. Villa Windsor waits in the Bois de Boulogne. Flood risks, rising water tables, Paris investing billions in climate adaptation. But physics is patient. Water finds its level. Eventually, the buildings are temporary. We know this. We pretend otherwise. We restore and preserve and protect. Important work, worth doing, but temporary. The ocean was patient at Mar-a-Lago. The ocean is patient everywhere. What survives beyond buildings' archives, photographs, auction records, the things we chose to preserve, the Duke's letters, the Duchess's jewellery, government documents, historical assessments, what does not survive staff names, daily routines, basement conditions, emotional reality, the things we chose not to preserve or chose not to create in the first place. The choice compounds across time. Every generation inherits what the previous generation saved. Every generation decides what to pass forward. The choices made in 1938 about whether to record staff names shape what we know in 2025. We cannot recover what was never recorded, cannot speak to people who have died, cannot ask questions of the silent archive. That moment passed, but we can choose what to do with what we have, and what to do moving forward. When Villa Windsor opens as museum, visitors will enter. They will walk through rooms where a king died, where his wife lost speech, where staff called her Your Royal Highness for 33 years. What will the visitors learn? What story will they carry forward? What understanding will they develop about exile and class and labor and love? The choice is being made now, by curators, by historians, by the people, planning exhibitions and writing wall text and deciding which artifacts to display, but also by us, by whether we ask the questions, by whether we demand comprehensive history instead of comfortable narrative, by whether we notice whose voices are missing and ask why. When you give up a crown for love, who carries the crown's weight? Not metaphorically, actually. Who maintains the houses, who polishes the crystal, who calls you your Royal Highness when you are not. When we preserve palaces, whose story do we preserve? The owners always, but also the workers. Or do we let that story disappear into the silence we have always accepted as natural? What responsibilities do we have to the invisible hands that polished wood to consistency of precious stone? To remember them, to try, to acknowledge that the scintillating crystal did not scintillate itself. The restoration workers are at Villa Windsor now. They have their own names, their own lives, their own families. They are doing skilled work, important work, making the building ready for the next chapter. Will their names be recorded? Will someone photograph them, interview them, preserve their contribution to this moment? Or will they disappear into the same silence that took the previous workers? The mansion waits, holding both possibilities. It could tell complete story. Owners and workers, beauty and cost, performance and mechanism, romance and labor, all of it true, all of it necessary for understanding. Or it could tell traditional story, famous people, beautiful rooms, tragic love, architectural significance, true but incomplete. The choice is ours, not the Duke's, not the Duchess's, not the staff's, ours, living now, deciding now, what story to tell, whose voice to preserve, what silence to accept. The gates are opening. The visitors will come. The story will be told. Which story? That is the question we must answer, not with words, with choices, with what we demand, with what we accept, with what we remember, and what we allow ourselves to forget. The ocean keeps pushing at the seawalls, at Cap d'Antibes, at Nassau, at every waterfront palace ever built. The structure holds, for now, and time moves forward, patient, relentless, giving us fewer excuses for pretending the choice is not ours to make.